So before the debate begins, I'd like to say a big thank you to Adika for choosing to still speak with me, even though I had some troubles getting here on time. I think she's an awesome person, and it goes without saying. And I'm really proud that she's the only woman I know on the final stage, except someone else identifies as a woman. Shout out to Becky. It's a big thing. Also, big shout out to Becky. Alright, so starting my speech. Literally just on Thursday, and this is incontrovertible evidence, BRICS added, Turkey added, Saudi Arabia, and added a couple of other states. All this is an attempt to expand the individuals and the states that are present within BRICS, largely because they know the importance that comes with a larger amount of states within a geopolitical organization, but also because they know the signaling effects that comes from gathering a huge amount of individuals who have a common interest and want to signal power in their regard. I think it's important we establish a couple of things in today's debate. This is an ACTA debate. It means we need to be able to prove that this is the best thing for Ghana, and BRICS, as opposed to all other alternatives, is the best option for Ghana to run with. So first off, what do we think Ghana looks like? I think every individual in this room knows what Ghana looks like. We think we have a huge amount of poor GDP. We have very, very huge amounts of structural adjustment policies leveled upon us by Bretton Woods institutions, which we are still trying to adjust to right now. We think the standard of living and basically the livelihood of individuals are under threat, and right now people want a certain level of improvement in their day-to-day dealings and in their lives in general. We think to the extent that we prove that this translates into better economics, and we think it's very important for you to understand the economics of it all. We think if we prove that this translates to better economics, we can then prove that this translates to a better Ghana. But secondly, we think some people are okay with being hungry if they feel like their pride is not attacked. If we prove that making this decision makes the average Ghanaian prouder and makes them more satisfied, we think we are equally pushing for a better alternative in that regard. So, to the model, what does significantly reducing interaction with the West mean? And note, this is the only discernible preconditionality for entering into BRICS Plus. We think any other thing that they want to point out is particularly assumptive, unless they can present incontrovertible evidence to that extent, which I think they probably should introduce in clarification right now to make for a fair debate. But if they still say they will not ask anything, I would assume we agree that this is the only thing that is particularly level. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, it is. What does significantly reducing interaction with the West mean? It means three things. One, it means you should not have exclusive or juicy bilateral relations with Western countries in that regard. This means that having bilateral transactional deals with states like the US, with states like England, are things you should particularly decrease and should particularly avoid in that regard. But two, we think it means you probably would have to opt out from a lot of deals that you are in with Bretton Woods institutions. We think that this looks like toning down your interaction with the IMF, toning down your interaction with the World Bank, and we think that that's particularly necessary. Three, we think it means that you probably would have higher leverage to operate more with member states of BRICS and BRICS Plus. We think that's what it means. What does it not mean? And this is the more relevant part of the characterization. It does not mean you would never trade with the West. Why do we say it does not mean that? Largely because even China and Saudi Arabia and Russia, which are fundamental institutions or fundamental states within BRICS, still have a certain level of trade that they engage in with the West. This is largely because international organizations and international corporations are compelled to still interact with new markets and interact with a broader level of individuals because of the gains that particularly will come off of it. What it means is that you probably would not have to pivot to give them an unreasonable, favorable deal, but you can still deal with them in that regard to a reasonable extent. But secondly, we do not think it means that you particularly cannot maintain or like deals that you've already entered into. You can exhaust them to the finality of that time and particularly decide not to enter into a new deal. The reason why this is relevant is because I don't want any team from up coming to claim we are already in a deal with the IMF. What is going to become of that deal? We can satisfy the duties and the requirements of that deal in status quo and decide that at the end of that deal, we are not going to deal with them any longer in this regard. I'm taking a lot of time to my field and characterization to avoid any confusion. Yes.
What does the slide mean when it says BRICS is a loose organization?
I'm saying this because Cap is on panel. I literally asked Cap the same thing. We can reasonably infer that loose organization implies that the conditionalities placed upon them are not particularly strict. If you want to characterize this to mean whatever clandestine thing you want to do, I think you have a high burden of proof to do that. Largely because we can infer from how BRICS operates right now to determine how BRICS Plus will operate in the future. We think like this is something that we can particularly discuss in this debate. But then, to the ball of my master, why is this necessary? Panel, listen. We think for the past 66 years of Ghanaian independence, there has been a huge amount of interaction with the West and deals like they particularly strike with the West. We think the huge amount of interactions and deals that have been gone into with the West have particularly not translated into any huge amount of economic improvement. They've not translated into any huge amount of social improvement. And to that extent, we think that that's bad. But what do we think has come off of the interaction with the West? We think largely we've been given lopsided deals that largely favors their end and disproportionately disadvantages us. Secondly, we think there have even been rumors of Western sponsored coup d'etat sponsored by the FBI in Ghana against individuals like Kwame Nkrumah. We think the West has constantly sought out to please themselves, and we think that's particularly something that we cannot gain. What this means is that this guy is going to prove that 66 years of failing in dealing with the West is somehow going to translate into something good in status quo. Two, we think Bretton Woods institutions that we've been dealing with have a track record of worsening our standard of living with structural adjustment policies leveled as one of the deals that are one of the reasons why you should deal with them. We think on their loans, there are things that imply that you need to increase tax brackets. That's why ordinary individuals in this room today, particularly, would complain about the taxing system's existence. That's why Parliament complains that his salary is not good enough for him because they tax a huge chunk of it in that regard. But beyond that, we think that the reason why BRICS makes for a better option is because they have a relatively higher amount of autonomy that is granted to you for you to operate. There is no huge amount of structural adjustment policies that is placed upon you in a bid to make sure that you deal with them. We think this means that you can control your state, control your affairs without any intrusion. But beyond that, they do not try to dictate your way of life or the culture that's accepted. And this is primarily important because Adika is going to do a lot of work on that. But beyond that, we think like the huge backlash that can necessarily come in this debate is what I want to assess, and we are going to prove that in our second speech. Very proud to propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for that speech. Let's call upon the leader of opposition to open the case for the opposition there.
Am I audible? Panel, I want to begin by noting that the info slide says that BRICS Plus is a loose coalition. In order for you to be able to judge whether this is a beneficial action to Ghana, you need to ask yourself, what does that definition mean? Firstly, it means that the fact that they're a loose coalition means that there's no straight, clearly defined benefits by joining this particular organization. But secondly, it also means that there is no obligation by other members of this particular organization to be able to do preferential trade deals with Ghana as a country. And that's why, for example, BRICS has never called itself an international organization, but that they are a coalition of countries, which means it only exists as a platform to be able to allow countries to come together and to be able to sell Note that this already exists with massive benefits in the form of the WTO, the UN, and other regional sub-bodies that can help Ghana. Second argumentation I want to make is on the benefits and whether these are justifiable. Firstly, in order for you to ask Ghana decided to join BRICS Plus, we need to ask yourself who are the founding members of BRICS Plus. They don't have the political and economic power to be able to help you as a country. We would argue for open opposition that this is unlikely to be the case. First, because most of these particular countries aren't powerful enough to be able to reduce the partnership with the West, because at the end of the day, Ghana has to make a trade-off. It's not simply that you are joining BRICS, but it's that you are joining BRICS and losing all the benefits that you have been able to gain for years and years by engaging with the West. How is it that most of these countries are not powerful? There are two major countries that are very powerful in the BRICS, and that's form the core of BRICS. First, China, and I'm going to analyze every single actor, both economically and politically. Economically, China is less likely to be economically sound moving forward for three structural reasons. Firstly, they've been beset by a lot of economic and banking crises, which means that given that in the modern economy, the way that most countries are able to get money is through housing and property. It means that it's unlikely that China as an actor will be able to help you move forward to be able to get either one, economic benefits, diplomatic benefits, etc. But second, the fact that China has spent a lot of money on their Belt and Road initiative, and the fact that we have clear evidence that in the vast majority of instances, this is a form of entrapment, meaning that as Ghana, this is no beneficial agreement or no beneficial country to engage in a coalition of countries with. Secondly, on Russia, Russia is not economically sound. First, because it spent a large amount of money on their war, but second, because of the war and the fact that they've been blocked from the street banking system, means that they don't have the capacity to be able to help you, to be able to force their own corporations within their countries to form good deals with the corporations that exist in Ghana. But lastly, the vast majority of the other countries that don't form the bulk of BRICS Plus are simply not strong. In the vast majority of instances, they are just like Ghana, and they claim to want to get benefits. What this therefore means, as I've already argued, is that these are a coalition of countries with no structural or clearly defined benefits and no obligation by other members of this particular organization to help other members. This implies one major thing. Firstly, it means that most of these particular benefits are mere projections and are not certain. Comparatively with the West, firstly, the West has been and is interested in working with Ghana to make sure our livelihood is much more better. Case in point, the WTO, and how the very structure of the WTO means that countries are forced to provide preferential treatment with Ghana simply because it's a member of the WTO. But secondly, in the vast majority of instances, organizations like the World Bank, organizations like the IMF have a long-standing history with Ghana, and for that particular reason, they are incentivized to make sure that Ghana is much more better. But secondly, given that Ghana is the only properly functioning democratic system and economy in the sub-region, it means that they have an increased incentive to help Ghana to prevent it from being the next Mali, to prevent it from being the next Niger, right? But second piece of argumentation, whether the trade-offs are justified, because at the end of the day, it's simply not joining BRICS Plus. It is arguing that we join BRICS Plus and put out all the benefits that we get from being members of Western institutions. Firstly, this is simply not justified as the trade-offs are not justified. There are four structural reasons for this. Firstly, as Ghana and being part or being closely aligned with these Western institutions, we are more likely to be closer to things like the Paris Climate Accord. We have much more benefits from being a Commonwealth subsidiary, which means that the citizens in Ghana are more likely to be able to get things like good scholarships, etc. But what this particularly means is that things are getting better for Ghana, which means this is not the point at which Ghana needs to be able to change things as it stands. There are two reasons for why things are getting better. Firstly, as I've already argued, China is a large country that is largely stable in the region, which means that this creates an incentive for foreign corporations in the West to have confidence in their investment choices, because now they recognize that given that we are aligned with the West, we are more likely to espouse and value democratic processes. We are more likely to espouse and value things like the rule of law, minority rights, property protection, etc. But second, given that we have a long-lasting relationship with the West, it means that most of these particular corporations actually see us as a potential benefit and a potential side for investment, and therefore this is more likely to help Ghana. Comparatively, as I've already argued, on BRICS Plus, they have no certainty, no assurance that this particular countries can ensure that the corporations that exist in them in these particular countries will be forced to engage in these particular deals with Ghana. Before I take a point from closing.
would you say that NATO is a loose organization or a tight one?
No, NATO is not a loose organization because they have very defined reasons why they formed in the first place to fight against communism, etc. Third argumentation and a global alliance, because the whole idea of BRICS Plus is that this is a form of global alliance that is going to help most of the developing world. The reason why this is a wrong global alliance for Ghana to choose is because this is a wrong time for us to choose sides. Why? Because currently the vast majority of Western countries are in some ways worried of the potential rise of China and its consequences. The fact that in the vast majority of instances, countries that align with China are more likely to build or develop anti-democratic processes, anti-minority social ideals, etc., which therefore means that first, the reason why this is more likely to be true is because firstly, when you exist as a country that is aligned with the West, you are more likely to pick up on these particular values, which therefore means that in the vast majority of instances, processes like elections, processes like economic outcomes are seen as trustworthy because in the vast majority of instances, people who are investing in them see the fact that you are aligned with the West as a form of oversight that allows them to believe that the investment is more likely to be true. This is incredibly important politically for Ghana because in the vast majority of instances, Ghana is a great politically divided, and that's why at every single point in time when you're going for elections, there's a lot of campaigning for peace, etc. The fact that we now switch to a coalition of countries that don't respect minority rights, that don't respect democratic processes, means that you are more likely in the near future to build these particular ideas and therefore worsen the huge amount of social change that we've been able to create. This is incredibly important because we need to be able to protect minority rights, we need to be able to protect people who who want to be able to succeed, but at the end of the day, even though we are not allowed them to succeed, we respect their rights, etc. When we join this particular coalition, we negate all of these things. For this reason, I'm very proud to win.
Thank you so much for that speech. We now welcome the Deputy Prime Minister here.
Okay. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, I'm very grateful to be here and to have had the opportunity to partner with really impeccable people. Yeah, I was just saying I'm grateful to be here and to have had the opportunity to partner impeccable people, regardless of how difficult it was to even get here or know if I was going to speak. Yeah, so everyone who's made this happen, I'm really grateful. And yeah, hoping for all the best. Okay, I'll start in 3, 2, 1. I don't exactly understand why there's a conversation around this probably being a loose organization of states. In order for you to actually have any buy-in or to co-opt any group of people, you obviously need to provide some level of benefit to them. It's unfair for opening opposition to come and say that this is probably going to be an organization of people coming in and shaking hands and going back home. We don't necessarily think that's the sort of setup this is going to look like. And there's a couple of reasons why that's true. Firstly, what I've said in terms of just co-opting people into it, but largely just the incentive and why this organization exists in and of itself. It's existing as a direct attack on the West and on the USA. So they have to prove some level of tangible benefit to actually be legitimate in the first place. It's unfair for them to say it's just going to be an organization that's not doing anything. But secondly, this loose organization is even more beneficial to Ghana in and of itself. So when they come and talk about how oppressive China is and how they don't care about things like human rights and etc., we think it's better if it's a loose organization because they're not going to impose their own political ideologies on Ghana like the West is currently doing, right? How Parliament is currently trying to relook their anti-LGBTQIA rights and stuff like that, and how that affects their identity and stuff like that. We think that's something you uniquely get from this loose organization that you don't necessarily get in their side of the world. But secondly, we think you need to recognize that this is an application, and why that application in and of itself is significant because of the signaling effect it's likely to create. This is not just an attack on the USA, it's an attack on the West and how they operate, their ideologies and how they interact with states, specifically within the developing world and stuff like that. We think this signaling effect is likely going to result in changes within how how Western states necessarily operate with developing states and Ghana specifically, and I think that's something that's important because they obviously care about this idea of like race to being a superpower and co-opting the most possible states. So if they are able to see that they're not the only viable option, and that there's a viable alternative that exists for states, then this is likely to create a signaling effect that in and of itself is important. We think this opt-out is significant for states, especially Ghana, considering the influence that the West has largely had on things like their policy and their politics. Because I think Prosper spends like a large amount of his speech proving how this doesn't necessarily mean we are isolating ourselves from the West, or any benefit we probably get from the West. Because we think those sort of like incentives are likely to exist for the West because of how individualist they are and how they probably get some level of benefit in terms of like resources and investing within like countries like Ghana and developing states in general. We think that in and of itself is a benefit that's likely to result in them still investing within this place, and that's something that doesn't necessarily prove they're always going to just wake up and leave. We think that in and of itself is important. But also we think even if we are going to like weigh up the sort of benefits we are getting from both deals and why that's significant. We think one, there's a unique benefit you get from our side of the world, right? So you're able to preserve your identity in a way that still allows you to get some level of economic benefits, and we think that is important. But secondly, we think it allows you to obviously have opt-outs that you otherwise wouldn't have, because in their world you probably get to only interact with deals with the West that are likely to be more exploitative, and they think they're the most viable option, so they are likely to not create alternatives for you, which is harmful and problematic. But we think even if they are going to say joining this organization is not going to benefit you economically, we think if you look like at countries like China and the sort of investment they've done within the continent at large, largely a lot of their projects they do are like things like infrastructure and stuff like that you don't necessarily get from the deals that you come in with when you interact with the West and stuff like that. So we think even in terms of like that tangible benefit that you get from these alternatives, that's something that we are likely to prove to you far much better. But we think at the point where we're already proving to you that it's an application, so our benefits are not hinged on you joining this organization. The signaling effect that it's likely to create in regards to the West knowing that they are not the only alternative, that we have an opt-out, that we can use power against you, we think that in itself becomes beneficial. Extending on what Prosper said in regards to reducing partnership not necessarily meaning isolation. I think Prosper gave like multiple alternatives or like situations where we already see the West interacting with states that are like against them. We see like trade with China, we see trade with Saudi Arabia. They need to do a lot of legwork to prove that that's something that's going to go away. Even international organizations in and of themselves, they need to do a lot of legwork to prove that they are suddenly going to not care about Ghana and stuff like that. Even though like organizations like World Bank Group were created to alleviate situations or like economic situations within developing states, they need to prove how all those incentives are likely not going to exist with things like the race to superpower, with things like this idea of like just wanting to be beneficial to developing states. We don't think those are things that they take closely.
Yeah, so you have not really shown the tangible benefits that when you join, you are going to get. You are just assuming that you are going to get certain benefit through autonomy and all those stuff. You have not really recognized them.
I think we've been very clear. At the point where you're able to create some level of signaling effect that's going to prove to the West that you have a viable alternative, that in and of itself is already beneficial. But we already proved to you that a majority of projects within like the region in and of itself come from countries like China and stuff like that. All you're proving to us is conditional aid. Maybe I'll get money from the USA and they'll change my policies. I fail to see how that's something you otherwise wouldn't get. But we think we also proved to you how it's really important, especially in regards to just creating that signaling effect that's important for these specific organizations. And we don't think that's something that they necessarily talk about within this debate. I think at the point we're able to prove to you that you're able to at least get some benefit from our side of the world that's significantly more than theirs, then the level of impact is far much larger. At the point where I'm not only going to get economic benefit because I have an opt-out or because like these states are already succeeding in terms of like their intervention within the continent, but I'm also able to preserve my identity and how that's important for Ghanaian people, like Prosper talks about in terms of identity and feeling pride in who you are. We think those are things that are necessarily important. And we think at the point where our impacts are not necessarily contingent on you joining the group, then it obviously speaks to a lot of the stuff they talk about in regards to how countries like Russia and China are not beneficial, but we already proved to you how they already are beneficial to these specific states. But even if we talk about what they say in terms of like how this is probably going to be rogue states and stuff like that, we already proved to you how there's already incentive to clap back against the USA. There's already things like wanting to actually buy into people, so obviously wanting to co-opt things that are beneficial to the countries that are coming in. So there's already a large incentive for this group in and of itself to be legitimate and to provide a level of tangible benefit to this specific country. They need to prove to us why this group is just going to be a group of people coming together to like sing Kumbaya and stuff like that. We don't necessarily think those are things that are true. At the point we're able to prove that we're able to be beneficial and we're able to create a unique benefit that you don't get but still maintain the idea of economic benefit, then I think we're able to win this debate proud too. Okay.
legal opposition. Here.
The Black Panther.
Hello guys. Alright, just using my 1 minute, I'd like to say thanks to Fattaw for doing one last thing with me. This is my 6th bill, hopefully the crowd comes to Alright guys, let's get into it. From opening opposition, China, South Africa, Russia, India still all have bilateral relations with Ghana. We can still exploit those bilateral relations for lucrative deals without having to lose any Western dependence or any Western support. If we can prove that BRICS is just bilateral relations on a group chat and gives you no extra benefit, it is illegitimate to trade off this kind of stability that Western countries give you. Let's talk about opening opposition. The first thing they say that DPM, opening government, DPM says, oh, we will apply and this will get the West to give us better deals. Sure, of course, the West will always do that. But the problem here is that now the requirement of joining BRICS means that you reject those deals, so you cannot accept them. Because BRICS says aggressively reduce your dependence on the West, which means even if strategically it positions the West to offer better deals, for you to be able to join BRICS, you have to decline them because you cannot be joining BRICS and then intensifying your trade, intensifying your dependency on the West, which means it's a strategic advantage they create but can never utilize, so none of the benefits materialize on their side. Secondly, it means that the requirement actually means you stay away from the West. So you cannot be the one seen by BRICS as actively approaching them or actively exploiting the kind of returns that come from you trying to join them. So BRICS will then now see you as just using them as a Trojan horse to get better Western deals rather than joining BRICS. And that's bad because you cannot get all the benefits on BRICS either. So if they are using this as a Trojan horse to get Western support, give them another seat on off. They should be 10th. Secondly, let's talk about loose organizations. PM says BRICS offer you more autonomy as a state, and that is the attraction point for lots of countries. That is true. But that autonomy simply means not putting strict commitments on you as a state who joins to maybe offer specific benefits to countries, which means that you are free to negotiate with member countries what you want to offer. This is what makes it loose, because members of BRICS have no assured commitment to BRICS. That's why they do not call themselves an international organization, they call themselves a coalition of states. So they cannot offer autonomy and still place maximum commitment on you. And that's why you can buy their autonomy, but you cannot then buy the claim that you still have assured benefits when you join BRICS. What then BRICS does is to say, we have a common platform, come and join, and now engage in your own interactions with other countries to get them to benefit. So it's like putting investors in a group chat and say, log in. That's why I said it's simply internal bilateral relations on a group chat. There is no difference because by maximizing autonomy, you reduce individual state commitments. That means that states now have to work for the investment that they get on their own. And that is zero assurance for Ghana. What this means is they needed to explain the capacity of Ghana to lobby for these deals in a way that is exclusive, not in a way that they cannot do in bilateral relations, which they already have deeply with China, expanding with BRI, deeply with South Africa because they are trade partners on the African continent. So there is literally zero net benefits that they are getting with all the losses that they cut off on their side. Secondly, let's talk about the significant reduction in Western partnerships. I'll take you, hold on. Let's talk about significant reduction in Western partnerships. We agree with all their characterization except one, because Prosper says, well, you can run out all pre-existing agreements, right, before you come back and then join BRICS. The problem is false. You cannot be existing in an agreement and then join BRICS. Here's the reason. Some of these agreements run to like 20 years, 30 years. And these agreements inherent in their existence is deepening Western integration, is deepening oversight, is deepening policy control of how you direct your policy. That's why in Mohammed's era, there was a ban on employment for a particular period of time, which means when these agreements persist, there is equally deepening clause of Western infiltration in these states, and so they cannot be members of BRICS, which means realistically, a drastic reduction of dependence on the West would actually mean pulling out of these economic deals in order to escape all those influences that they have. And these comes with economic shocks, so you need to be able to debate what happens when you have to opt out of the IMF deal that Ghana currently has. With a failing economy, with economy in crisis, the likely economic signals is going to get, the likely withdrawal of investments, because there is no assurance of stability in the near future, inflation that's going to rise, and the massive cost of living that's going to exist. What this means is that all the consequences are ones that they need to debate. You cannot say, we'll join BRICS by drastically reducing, but then would allow the people who are day in, day out compounding Western influence to still exist on agreements that span 20 and 30 years time. It is simply irrational. Opening gap.
If an application is placed, you can only then start to make people make adjustments after you accept it. You cannot say, we'll ban you from dealing with
No.
before we accept.
Listen. Ukraine was, applying to join the EU. But then they have to meet preconditions before they join the EU. So that's how these applications work. So when you are applying to join BRICS, before BRICS countries vote and say, we accept you, you have to drastically reduce tension and ties with the West. You have to do all these things prior to you joining BRICS. And we say, even when you join, there's some assurance of benefits, because by the very assurance of the autonomy it gives you, countries have no inherent commitment, and so countries now decide what commitments they give to which countries within BRICS that is beneficial to them. And you do not show any strategic advantage for Ghana to be able to exploit this situation. Finally, let's talk about trust in elections and political volatility. Election oversight by things like the European Union, the UNHCR, Amnesty International, these are the oversight agencies that observe elections and back the results and serve as sources of trust in a very volatile electoral process that we usually have in Ghana. There's usually the perception that an election has been stolen, an election is corrupt, etc. And we see this reflected in sparks of violence. The sources that we usually draw to deficit that trust is oversight from international Western organizations that are able to back these elections and say we observe and it is legitimate. What happens when you stay away from them? You now take away that trust that they bring, which means you reduce the trust in elections and likely increase the resort to violent opposition, because people now believe in these elections less. Because when they question, there will not be a UN or there will not be a EU observatory who would say, we think the election is fair, which makes, for instance, violent opposition illegitimate, and so states can actively oppose it and clamp down on it. What does this do? You create huge risk of political volatility and instability, especially in Ghana with the kind of clashes we saw in the last election. What this does is to create things like signaling effect on economics, investor confidence, because they cannot trust the stability of the state in the long term. They gradually start to slow down incoming investment, but equally start to pull out pre-existing investment. These are the factors that compound to create massive inflation, cost of living, struggle within the economies in a way that cripple the Ghanaian state. It is simple. We can exploit all these bilateral benefits without losing Western interference. We say get the best of both worlds, both worlds.
The bench, Andy, I'm so sorry, but you won't be winning this time. And then to CB and to some other special people in my life. And also to my mom who doesn't know I'm debating. I do them at a seminar so I could make it. Yes. Because according to her, it's time to give up on debate, but still we have to debate. Yes. Alright, so I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. The bulk of the cases that you get from opposition is the general idea that, well, there are no unique benefits when you join BRICS. And that is cemented by the case you get from Andy, when Andy says that, well, we already have relations with Russia, not Russia, China, South Africa. We could still use these bilateral relations to get better. These are our responses. First of all, the enforcement makes it clear that countries in BRICS or BRICS Plus generally is pushing for an anti-West policy, which means that BRICS Plus will definitely expand without Ghana joining. That being said, at the point in time where BRICS Plus becomes big enough, countries in BRICS Plus can decide to cut off those bilateral relations they have with countries like Ghana. And that's why, for example, countries in the G7 can cut off relations with countries that don't align with their ideologies. If BRICS expands, Ghana is lost from those relations. We don't get anywhere we sustain those relations. But more importantly, their characterization they give on loose organizations is not true. Fattaw note it. And they cement that by saying, Fattaw says, that is why BRICS Plus doesn't call itself an international organization, but it calls itself a coalition. That is not true. The reason why BRICS Plus doesn't call itself an international organization is because it does not have a defined charter like NATO. What that means is that at a point in time where BRICS Plus doesn't have that and Ghana joins BRICS Plus, Ghana becomes a part of the formation of the charter that guides BRICS Plus. That becomes even more better for Ghana because Ghana now becomes a permanent voting member that determines what BRICS Plus looks like, and you don't get that benefit from their side. Super now will tackle all the other ones that you get in those cases. But even more important, if they say that necessarily you have BRICS Plus and there are no unique benefits, we say because China, Russia, South Africa are already part of BRICS Plus, what it means is that in the now, we are unable to unlock some unique deals with China and Russia because we are not part of BRICS Plus. If we were part of them, we would have had those unique deals. The first thing I'm going to analyze is a number of contexts and a number of burdens. First thing I'm going to prove is the context of the terms and conditions we get and how it necessarily fits better for Ghana. The only thing you get from Prosper and their team is based on the benefits aspect, and all of those ones, we'll deal with them. First thing you need to understand is that this BRICS Plus was originally created by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The things we need to note is that in the now, Ghana has no major tensions between it and the founding countries of BRICS Plus. What we can say is that at least we have strong bilateral relations with some countries like China, South Africa, or we probably have an average relationship with countries like Russia. We don't have any tensions. The reason why this is important is because having tensions with countries that have huge influence in BRICS, like Russia and the rest, can give them a unique incentive to stifle us later when we join. But we don't have that, which means they don't have that unique incentive to stifle us. But secondly, that context also allows Ghana to leverage on its current ties with some countries like China and South Africa to expand its relations with other countries in BRICS Plus that gives it all the unique benefits that comes with bilateral relations. What this means is that Ghana can override the first impediment that every country faces when they want to join a union, which is tensions with members in those countries. Ghana has checked the first box correctly, and we think Ghana is good to go. But second thing we need to understand on the terms is how it operates as a loose organization. Prosper's definition of loose organization is not true. I also went for clarity from CAP. When they said what loose is, CAP clarified that loose means they are much more open to accepting. The reason why this makes much more sense is because when you consider institutions like NATO is very strict on the countries it administers. But for BRICS is much more open to these relations. And that's what the loose means. It means that in relation to other big international institutions, it is much more open to accept. And don't worry, super now I'll take what the PS I beg you. I need to finish as quickly as possible. But what you need to also understand is that by the fact that it is loose, it means that the member states of BRICS are far less likely to veto out the joining of countries. If you compare it to NATO, for example, where Turkey is frustrating Sweden from joining NATO, that is far less likely to happen in the case of BRICS because they are much more loose and open to accept. The reason why this is true is because of, first of all, the unique incentive of BRICS Plus to expand. But secondly, that unique incentive to expand an anti-West narrative. And that means they'll leverage on any small opportunity they get to expand their narratives. The reason why this context is far more good for Ghana is because, first of all, by the fact that they are loose, it means they'll accept us far more quickly. But it means then that less lengthy application procedure fits into the unique incentive that BRICS has to expand an anti-West narrative. How? Because first of all, you need to understand that Ghana is seen as the zone of Western influence, where we get aid, partnerships, and the likes. This means that if BRICS gets Ghana, it is the biggest achievement they've ever made. And that is why BRICS wants Ghana, and that's how we get the most amount of unique incentives. In effect, BRICS Plus getting Ghana would be the biggest thing, like for example, Russia getting Kiev in the Russia-Ukraine war. The reason why this is good for Ghana uniquely and a good context for us is because Ghana has some fluid political space. If you quickly get Ghana into the space, it means that there's a less space for politicization of the BRICS narrative in Ghana, which means Ghana is far more likely to avoid all those political stability issues that comes with joining BRICS. but the unique incentives, which is significantly reducing the partnerships. Why is it a good thing for Ghana, or why is it not even a big deal? Because they make it look like a big deal. First of all, if you consider the current political state of Ghana, then we need to make a concession. If we are saying Ghana should join BRICS, it means that to some extent, there should be some home support for joining BRICS. If not, it's like a treason to wanting to join BRICS by the people of Ghana. That doesn't make sense. At least if there's some home support, it means there's reason to join BRICS. But even then, Ghana can currently align with the current trend of anti-West in the West region. That is why a lot of countries in Western Africa today are moving away from Western influence. It means that Ghana can simply sit back and tell the West. The reason why we are trying to move away from you and cutting up partnerships is not because we really don't like you, but simply because we think for the West it is good for us. And that's what countries do all the time. And then Ghana benefits from all of those things. The reason why this is very good and we get a unique benefit is because we need to understand that first of all, Ghana should end up becoming the biggest player in the West. In status quo, Ghana has significant relations with the West. Why it uniquely benefits Ghana? I've already explained how Ghana is the price, and leveraging of this gives us a good purpose. But more importantly, Ghana gets the chance to play the big boy in the Western region, because they can leverage on the power they see from BRICS in the Western region to become the biggest player in the Western sector. Proudly.
Thank you, Member of Government, for that speech. Let's welcome the Member of Opposition here.
Fatness.
Hello, can you hear me? Before I start, I'd just like to say something simple. I think since I started debating in level 100, I always thought that debate was just this extracurricular that I do out of passion and learning. It's not anything more. But continuing, I've seen that it actually takes something and also gives something back. I remember times like when I and Opoku snuck into WDC to do rounds and we had to miss class. The reason that I had to miss a date on the last week Friday. My cousin who I was staying with in Accra had to start a startup. That needed me, but I needed to leave that startup that would give us money and come and debate in Engo the last time. I think in as much as these things happen, we need to appreciate that it takes something, but then it also gives us the good memories and the last set of stuff. Thank you to Opoku for all this time. This is last week, by the way. This is our last partnership. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Now we think it's very reductionist that Andy's answer to the pushback from OO on how they are loose conditionalities is to say these things are just paperwork agreements and just platforms, and that they owe no obligations to give you anything. Why do we think that this is bad? One, it doesn't flip the analysis they bring, it only competes against that. First, let us engage why a loose agreement conditionalities in terms of imposing things like IMF deals that tells Ghana that do not employ more than this ETC when they are giving loans and obligations is better for Ghana as a country. Why is this true? When we put like tariffs, not tariffs, when we put certain measures that our deals come with and our loans come with, and it is not to lose, what this does is that it prevents people like politicians in terms of political seasons from going out to give people more roads, more water at the detriment of their countries. It prevents things that brought us into economic downfalls in the first place. That is why after IMF deals are done, we are okay for the time being. They pump $10,000 billion in Ghana and we are okay. But when we move away after those conditionalities are done, that's when we go back to the hell world that we are in. Which is to say, maybe for the government, maybe for the people who lead, it's okay to have loose things. But for the average Ghanaian that this debate needs to cater about, it's a bad thing to have much more loose things happening. Let's engage the second meaning of loose that happens here. This is our first case. Panel, there's an egregious assumption in the opening house and in closing gap that the motion which says Ghana would apply to join means that Ghana will join. At the time where Turkey was allowed, at the time where all those people were allowed, Nigeria was bound. Which is to say, if we agree with Andy's definition of loose, then everybody should get in. It's just a platform. There are nothing that prevents you. And also, the things that this guy plays are not very analogous. They compare a military organization in a North Atlantic Treaty stance to one thing that breaks over here. I know that the average
in the long term and why the comparative of the West is better. Firstly, there are reasons why this country, as this BRICS, accepts people in. As we always say, resources are not unlimited, which is to say they must gain certain things and must have a lot of benefits. What is that to say? Firstly, for people to be accepted, they must have a lot of regional influence. What does that mean? That's the reason why Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia was taken, because they control OPEC, because they control the Islamic states in that region. Secondly, people like South Africa, they control SACO. They know that when they partner with these guys, they get a lot of unique regional control. That's why Brazil was accepted, right? Ghana does not have that. Even the largest influencer in West Africa, that is the biggest economy, Nigeria, was Barbs. First thing, they do not get that application. Secondly, unique benefits that you get. As we have seen, BRICS doesn't just open its arm. Everybody enter BRICS. Why? It is not economically good to accept people who have nothing unique to give you. Which is to say, the things that we can give BRICS are things that other African countries can also give them. Which is to say, people like South Africa also have natural resources, etc. Ghana is not the only one blessed with cash with natural resources. Thirdly, the Eastern political ideology. It's important to analyze that when these countries that are currently part of BRICS were joining, they joined under leaders that were much more having affinity to the East. What is that to say? Mohammed bin Salman was not a lover of the Western ideology. He was one that mostly shifted to these guys. Two, people like Lula de Santos of Brazil were not people that were very had affinity to these guys. They were people that already had these ideas. Three, when Donald Trump got out of power and election-winning West came in 2015, that is when Modi of India moved away from these guys to come there. Which is to say, the current Ghanaian power are people that are much more affiliated to the Western ideology of doing things rather than to the East. Fourth reason why they need countries that are very democratically stable and countries that they can get for a very long time. The basic reason why Nigeria was banned was because there's a rising wave of things like coup d'etats, etc. Which means that the benefits they would get become less possible for these guys, and there's no real reason to take these guys, knowing that Mali, knowing that Niger, knowing that these people are economically like democratically unstable, and this Western African area are people who are more likely to take their leases on. Last thing, as they said, that there must be an agreement before you join. We cannot cut our ties with the West before joining these people, which means already, as long as we are with the West, these things don't happen. Why do we think that a priori every argument that happens in the room, when we have shown structurally that the application will fail, why is that bad? The reaction that these guys want from the West will not happen, showing that the possibility of these guys even joining is bad. Second impact that we give to you is the reason why we have a bargaining chip with the West. There are two things that Ghana has. One, we have our natural resources. Two, we have our long steady loyalty. The natural resource, unfortunately, a lot of all other countries have, and they are poorer than this one in instance, which means they can get that from anyone. The second thing we have is the loyalty that we have to these guys, which makes them give us things like aids, scholarships, free movement, loans, etc. You lose the strategic positioning when you get out of these people, which means the loyalty that you have on that guy is something that goes away. We have proven that Ghana cannot join on this possible method, and why that alone is bad. Why do we think that this application, even if they join, is not something that is going to work? Fattaw does three things. He analyzes China on housing, he analyzes Russia on the SWIFT bank, and generalizes everyone else. Why do we think that individually everyone else is going to be much more better on that regard? One, Chinese policy of eroding patents and using has led to in-competition, which means that every company does not have its sole one, everyone fights. Two, Mao's policy of not giving birth to a lot at a time caused that now old age is on the rise, which meant that free labor that they wanted and had, which gave them the power, are not things that they have. You only gave housing policies. I gave two to prove that this would fail. Two, Russia is under sanctions, is under war, and is fighting proxy wars all across the country, which has a sunk cost. Three, we have the South Africa suffering from energy crisis, suffering from corruption, and the economic freedom fighters who are trying to destabilize the country. Brazil, Bolsonaro's loss has led to an uprising, which means that much more of the things are becoming more influenced than out-focused. The reason is this: India will leave as soon as Donald Trump comes back, right? And they are the most people to leave. All those countries and the economic power that we gain from them are things we lose in the likely closer future. Everyone,
just as we're doing now, I'd like to just give some shout-outs to the entire contingents that came here. We have Alexandra, Alia, Frida, Jacqueline, Jonathan, Jamai, Abdul, see you guys and then to everyone, Eric, good job for making the space a better have for treating people. And a fun story, and our first video I didn't break. This is my second attempt on Alright, if I'm audible, I'm going to start. Alright, 3, 2, 1. Let's start by taking our closing position, right? Because they are quite a bit derivative. Here's why. They have two responses about the loose organization entanglement, and their definition is that if BRICS is loose, then it means they give their members too much freedom and they don't give them enough restrictions and control their economic policies. And Ghana needs that control over their economic policies, or they are going to fall into recessions, etc. That is quite similar to all the oversight that Andy talks to you about election oversight and bodies that will come and look at your democracy, if it's good, overseeing your elections. So like the ball of that idea is oversight. Two responses to that. One is that we think that in our 60 years of engagement with the West, there has always been that oversight that we so crave for, and we have landed into much more deeper shit. For example, in that same period of oversight, there has been countless coups and those francophone countries in West Africa, for example, and also having wild ways of coup ongoing. And France being a member of the West means these guys are not even capable enough to implement those oversight policies that they talk about. And if those oversight policies are economic oversight policies like they so want, Ghana just keeps going back to the IMF time and time again. I could argue that those oversight policies are created to make sure that Ghana is always a slave and a puppet of those guys, so that we keep going back for more and more debt so they can control us and make us their puppets. But the second response is that we think that that strict supervision has implemented an idea in Ghana that diminishes our nationalism and national identity, right? It makes upcoming leaders of Ghana think that Ghana is simply not good enough and is simply a copycat of the West. Why is this true? Two things. We see upcoming leaders always ready and eager to leave the country to go out there. So for example, if BRICS gives us that loose freedom that we don't like, we think we like it because it's going to create an idea that if you rise to become a leader in Ghana, for example, you can control Ghana as you want to. You don't have to be much more sneaky to run away from that supervision and be extra corrupt and be extra more sneaky, right? That means you don't breed more terrible criminals in Ghana with that terrible oversight. The second thing that they talk to you about is that BRICS has no incentive to allow Ghana to join simply because we applied. Nigeria was bounced, right? South Africa has the resources. And I blame opening governments for not analyzing the incentives for BRICS to accept Ghana. That's something Jonathan tells you right off the top of his speech about Ghana being in a strategic position with our resources. But if that wasn't clear enough, specific examples to prove why we are better than Nigeria, because we think Nigeria is quite a bit more terrible than Ghana on this group of things, right? Two reasons why. For example, one, Nigeria has destabilization issues. In the northern of Nigeria, for example, Boko Haram and religious issues are why the place is not attractive for those kinds of investments, right? For example, the second example, a lot of countries have denied Nigerians visa to enter while they allow Ghanaians to enter. That means the stability of Ghana is attractive enough. We are not as terrible as Nigerians on comparison. Sorry if I'm sounding like I'm demeaning Nigerians, right? It's because of the engagement, right? The third thing CEO then tells you is that, look, even if Ghana joins, we are not going to benefit. One is that the West is fighting proxy wars. They don't have money. Russia don't have money. South Africa doesn't have money. Brazil just lost an election. All of those things, right? First response. Okay, hold up. Andy, shoot up your response.
The attraction point of BRICS is offering countries more autonomy. So by creating a chart that they become like everyone else. So they will either never create one or create a very open one. So being a charter creator is really not.
No. Alright. So look, it's a process, and on both fronts, Ghana benefits. If we join now that they're a loose organization, that freedom are just rebatted heavily until benefits us up until the point of charter creation. And if it ever gets created, at that point, the benefits Jonathan already talks to you about less opposition, like more say in what BRICS can do with their funds, because we are an equal partnership with them and we are not applying to join after we already have 30 to 40 freaking members, right? And he doesn't have a case. But here's the response. If USA is fighting wars in Syria, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, Dorvlo tells you they have enough resources to help Ghana. But if Russia is fighting Ukraine, one country only, all of a sudden Russia is broke. But the second response is that the news that he got are from westernized media outlets like The Economist and like Forbes today. Those guys don't have incentives to praise and put Russia in a positive light. So Russia could actually existed on a much better scope than the westernized media outlets that give them that information. Oh look, Russia is broke. I don't even think that's true. The evidence are westernized. We don't like the West. Let's move on to OG then and why we beat out opening down, right? What does Fattaw tell you right at the top of his speech? Fattaw tells you that look, members of the BRICS themselves aren't powerful enough to cut off ties completely with the West. So like, why is Ghana even much more sensible and better than those members to cut off ties when we join them? A, it's not going to be a total tie cut-off. Like, it's going to be reduced drastically. Here's what it looks like because Prosper didn't tell you. So for example, we think when COVID hit, right, people that were in bed with the West were still getting vaccine shots sent over to them. China got them, Russia got them. I don't see why we want to be in isolation. But they didn't prove that isolationism is something that is going to happen on our side once we apply to join the BRICS. I don't see how that is relevant. But the second response, right? I mean, the second case that Fattaw tells you is that look, the West actually have Ghana's interest at heart. That's why we have a long-standing relationship with IMF and we are members of the World Trade Organization. Well, newsflash, China is also a member of the World Trade Organization. They are fighting like trade wars with the USA right now, but they are still fighting, they are still members. I don't know why Ghana joining this, we are automatically going to quit. But the second response is that, look, those unique resources that Ghana has, like gold, being the second largest producer of cocoa, that's not something Nigeria has or South Africa even also has, means that once we join, we are likely going to remain a member of BRICS. We are going to have much more long-standing benefits with them. What does Andy tell you and why we beat Andy's speech, right? Andy tells you Ghana can still be a member of BRICS. It's not worth being in trade with those BRICS guys, and it's not worth the trade-off. The response is, we don't really have a choice here. Even if we don't make the trade-off, the West are already making isolationist moves that will eventually touch us because there is a progression of minimalistic activities from the West. Here's why this is true, right? One, for example, they have prices that are affecting them uniquely because they want to promote democracy. They are storming places like Syria, Afghanistan, and other things. They are building military industrial complexes that has resulted in them minimizing the money they send out. For example, Trump put out the Paris Climate Accord because, fuck it, why should we donate $3 billion to African countries? Biden came and said, we don't want our troops fighting in Pakistan, right? What is to show that at the point in time to come, they wouldn't want to reduce those levels of aid they give Ghana. For all those reasons, it takes this debate to close down and it's going to be so proud to get here.
Chief Race House to Endbringers, all of the speaking finalists should please move out. Speaking finalists, please move out before the debate. Let's now knock out the opposition way to end the debate for our here.
So, as Dorvlo said, this is my last AO, and the reason is that I'm really tired. As an interlocutor, at this point, I don't really know what wins, and I've paid the Andy tax a lot throughout this tournament, and I believe that I will not pay it for the last time on my way out of Accra. Yeah, so starting in 3, 2, 1. So first, I'll show why we beat OG. He beat them for 4 major reasons. 1, we flip their case of white man bad, yellow man good. What does this mean? They say that the white man imposes stringent conditions, has funded coup d'etats and a whole lot in Africa. The yellow man will give us a lot of autonomy for us to develop our economy. Dorvlo at the top of his case analyzes how loose structure, accepting every frame of loose in today's debate, and beats them on it. He says that at times where Ghana has become relatively strong economically was when we are under the stringent conditions of the white man bar as they claim. Why is that true? He tells you that those conditions, ensuring fiscal discipline, ensuring that in electoral cities where politicians overspend their budgets because they want to ensure populist measures so that they win elections, which ensures fiscal, indiscipline, and lets us go to borrow and hurt our economies and all those stuff, are things that they check on during times that we are under their checks and all those stuff. When we leave their systems after completing those IMF deals and all those stuff and come into a world where we are autonomous, you see our politicians going through that same cycle of doing those fiscal indiscipline, monetary indiscipline and all those stuff. And we go back to them. That is the reason for the cyclical dependence on them. It is because when you go there, the lessons that we learn, we don't apply them when we leave. It means that when you go under an autonomous system like Yellow Man, what it means is that you still go under those less stringent conditions. Our politicians will be less, will be more indisciplined during electoral seasons and all those stuff, and it means that you are likely going to fail in that regard. But also realize that they say the next thing then is this defeats your ultimate goal of better economy for Ghana. The next reason why we beat OG is that we engage their frame of the application window and flip that case on that. So, what's the name? We show how the application is likely to fail. That is not adequately responded to, especially by CG. The only response to defeating the Nigerian example, not the structural reasons as to why we fail, i.e. the fact that we are not having geopolitical positioning such as Saudi Arabia and such as Turkey. So Turkey being an influencer of Islamic European countries and Saudi Arabia being an influencer in the Middle East and OPEC, and that strategic position of geopolitical advantage that you give to BRICS, you are not likely to have those things and all those stuff. What it means is that you are likely to fail in that regard in your application. They do not defeat that analysis by the defeat of the example of Nigeria. But the impact of this is that when you lose out now and you come back to the West, your political and bargaining leverage and your chips are ones that are going to be less. It means that now you are not the weaker party at the negotiating table, and when you come to them, it means that you have lost out. One side has rejected you, they can do with you what you want. You are likely to submit to their whims and caprices. But what is the impact of that? If you buy Andy's, frame of how during this application window, you have to meet all those conditions. Dorvlo impacts you that during that time of meeting that conditions, that's even more pernicious. How does it prove that? To meet those conditions of reducing our dependence on the West within that application window, it means that the 1 billion that Ghana is 3 billion or so that Ghana is receiving from IMF is something that we have to cut in the meantime. We impact that case, and that means that it is much more helpful in that window, in that regard. But also that defeats their signaling effect, because you have shown structural reasons why the application is likely to fail. The people in the West, they know these structural reasons. They have Nigeria was rejected, they know that Ghana will be rejected. What that means is that your signaling effect argument is less likely to work. Your signaling effect arguments of how they can get better conditions because of this application can only work when they know the application may likely succeed, and they will take steps to avert that. Insofar as they know that this application will not succeed, they will not take any steps. They don't care. You fail, you come back to them, you lead the weaker party, and they will help you at the negotiating table for that.
See, Fattaw, the info slide literally says decrease interaction with the West when you join BRICS Plus. But beyond that, just saying China is doing this story now, Saudi Arabia has already joined, and you even know how status quo is better. They will not engage that at all.
Yeah, so that meeting, I was using the impact to beat opening. Yeah, but still, I still flip your major case, economic case, Yellow Man, White Man, bad in that regard. But also, there's a lack of delta in their case, because their case says that you can still trade with the West, you can still be a member of the IMF when you join, when you join BRICS and all the stuff. Similarly, if you join BRICS, you can still, if you don't join BRICS, you are still dealing with them on a daily basis. It means that their case and the framework to establish today's rate has no delta in that regard. The next reason is because of mechanistic problems. Their cases has less mechanistic problems. Their cases are assumptive possibility analysis instead of possibility analysis, especially when you have that POI of what are the benefits you get. They are assuming that you may get those benefits. They don't show why you are likely to get those benefits. You can't accept their case. I'm guilt tripping you because this tournament, any strategy of this has not worked. I'll guilt trip you then on why you beat CG next. So CG's case is twofold. One, if BRICS expands, we benefit. If BRICS gets a charter, we become a charter member. First, Our second extension deals with the benefits of that. When Dorvlo shows you the likely death of BRICS, because of the structural reasons that he gives you, of how was the name, all the countries that he talks about in BRICS and all those stuff are having structural challenges, and because of that, they are likely to fail. You can watch the Ben Shapiro video for informative purposes of how China will fail in the next 10 years and all those stuff. It means that all the likely benefits that if BRICS expands, you will get are things that will not actualize. But secondly, that case that you become a charter member is assumptive that if you become a charter member, it means benefits, no mechanization. Greece was a charter member of the UN. Greece experienced the 2008 financial crisis, 2010 or something, and all those stuff. A lot of countries are charter members of the WTO, no benefits and all those stuff. There are certain cases that they expand the scope of bilateral relations and how you're able to use that platform to benefit and all those stuff. We have shown you can still benefit, like whether you're in BRICS or outside of BRICS, bilaterally and all those stuff. It depends on the strength of your bilateral sense. If you're outside BRICS and you're not strong in terms of your negotiations, if you're in BRICS, you may be in that organization and still not get any bilateral benefits. Now, why do you beat one, we outframe them, and because of that, you can't give them the win. Because I know you're the team, you want to give them the win. First, why do you outframe them? Yeah, let me go trick you. Like, that's the only strategy I have left in this tournament. One, all their impacts are dependent on BRICS application, Ghana's application succeeding. Insofar as you have shown that the application will not even succeed, all their impacts are less likely to be true, and our impacts are the ones that are more likely to be true. So our case is a priori in your nice weather you usually like, or upstream of yes in that regard. Our case happens before their case can happen. But secondly, in terms of responsiveness, you are better than them. They don't respond to the economic arguments, white man by yellow man, but good arguments from these people and all those stuff. We flip that case, so you're much more better responsive. But strength of mechanisms and impacts. On our second extension, one, the impact of their case is that BRICS will have less ability to help us. We don't just say that BRICS will have less ability to help us, that BRICS will even fail in that regard and to be a failed venture. But secondly, we give more scope as to how BRICS will fail as opposed to South Africa and all those stuff. They only concentrate on China and Russia. There is no way any other team wins apart from us. Thank you very much.